Welcome to World Business. Now, a bold new player has entered the US telecom arena. Trump Mobile, a fresh venture by, you guessed it, the Trump family, has launched with big ambitions, offering a $499 Android phone called the T1 and a $47.45 flagship plan, promising unlimited everything, all wrapped in a Made in America message. It's not just a flashy debut, it's a calculated attempt to tap into consumer discontent with the telecom giants, promising America first branding, US customer support and mid-range pricing. The company says it wants to offer an alternative that's patriotic, personal and proudly independent. But breaking into the telecom industry is no small feat. The business is structured as a mobile virtual network operator, MVNO, meaning it leases infrastructure from major carriers like AT&T and Verizon. The handset, while assembled in the US, still relies on global components, and despite the marketing noise, it's unclear whether there's meaningful space in the market for a politically tinged telecom. Well, to assess the viability of this launch, I'm delighted to say we're joined by telecommunications analyst Ron Westfall of Hyperframe Research. He's here to evaluate whether this signals disruption, no pun intended, or just another branded. Ron, great to see you. What factors determine, Ron, whether a new mobile virtual network operator, MVNO, glad I got that right, can find market share in today's telecom sector?
Excellent question, Guy. And I believe that there are some fundamentals that have to be checklisted. One is, you hit it. That is a competitive price point. And looking at the current U.S. market, $47, $45 a month actually is competitive. So now it comes down to how effectively can that price differentiation translate into customer traction. And so the fundamentals are there. And however, is okay on the marketing side. As we know, it is an MVNO. So it's going to be operating actually over competitor networks. And this is not unique to Trump Mobile. We see the same principle for other MVNOs, such as Mint Mobile, which is heavily publicized by actor Ryan Reynolds. And so we can see this model can be successful, at least in the US market. And the 47-45 price point is not a coincidence. It's symbolic, meaning that because Trump is both the 47th and the 45th president of the US in terms of how the presidents are counted by their terms, that I think will translate into I would say, it's a very specific market that will pick up the offering. That is the America First crowd or economic patriots, folks who would, I think, be very interested in using the service, not just because of the price point, but also because of intangibles such as the marketing benefits, as well as demonstrating their economic patriotism. So that, I think, are going to be factors in determining whether or not Trump Mobile will have an impact on the overall U.S. mobile market.
It's very interesting and certainly very clever marketing tactics with the 47 and 45. Mr. Trump and his organization's famously quite fond of control. In what ways do you think reliance on infrastructure from huge companies like AT&T might limit Trump Mobile's control over their own quality, their own pricing, for example?
That's an excellent question. And that is really the trade-off of the entire MVNO model, if you will. And so Trump Mobile will have to actually have, I would say, well-negotiated agreements to have that assurance, meaning when they're using that other network, whether it's AT&T, Verizon, or T-Mobile, they have to make sure that the main operator is providing those assurances in terms of quality of service, in terms of, for example, a service level agreement and other, built-in safeguards to make sure that the service is not going to be let down. Now, the good news is that we've seen the MVNO model actually be pretty successful in terms of where it has been implemented. And so, in terms of the network side, the technical side, I believe it's there. The main challenge, again, is going to be on the business side, i.e., will things like customer support, and this is, I think, going to be I would say, a tiebreaker. They want to have customer support call centers set up in the U.S., meaning that is going to require new training, requiring new resources, and other aspects that aren't actually applicable to many of the MVNOs where they're using already established call centers. So this is going to give Trump Mobile some control over the overall quality of the service. And it's really going to be, I'd say, more of a business challenge than a technical challenge as to how successful they are.
And Ron, let's look at the T1 as a product. Do you think it's going to be able to have enough of its components made in America for it to genuinely qualify as having that made in the USA label?
Yeah, great question. And the short answer is no, at least not today and not through the rest of 2025. And the Trump organization has already indicated that this is really not a made in the US phone during its inception and into the near future. In fact, I would say the model closely resembles a Chinese-made phone, the Revel 7 Pro 5G, and I think that's already out there. And they want to transition over time toward having more of these capabilities built into a phone that is made in the US. However, that's realistically something that's not going to happen anytime soon. And so that's going to really be a challenge, I would say, in terms of executing it to fulfill that made in the US part of the T1 phone marketing. And so they're, I think, going to have to adjust some of the marketing in the near term, but also just really provide I would say, a roadmap that's real about, okay, which facility in the US is actually going to make the phone and how much of it will actually be made in the US. I would say it would be a long time before everything can be literally said made in the US. But further out, I would say in the midterm, that you would have a blending. And actually, if it's made in the US, will be very much up in the air and to be decided.
Ron, in your job, I imagine you've seen so many of these devices, these gadgets, many that have launched and succeeded, many that have launched and failed. When you look at what the T1 promises, how do you think it's going to compare in terms of speed, design, key features, all the things that we think of as being so important against other phones in that $400 to $500 range?
Yeah, excellent question. The US, that is characterized as, I would say, the mid to low end of the smartphone market. And so in terms of competing against, similar products that are, within that range, for example, a lower end Samsung smartphone, they are all using the Android operating system. So I don't think there's going to be much differentiation when it comes to that aspect. Where I think you're going to see the differentiation is really, again, about the price point. As long as they can hit that $499 at least as a list price, and yes, there'll probably be some discounting and so forth to really spur adoption. I think the phone can be competitive at that level. And I think it's also going to be coming down to, intangibles, such as how quickly that smartphone can position itself as supporting, for example, AI capabilities. That is, using AI inferencing to assure the privacy of AI workloads that the user is able to engage. And so I think this is something that actually Trump Mobile can have an opportunity to take advantage of. However, they won't be alone in promoting something like that to try to stand out in a very competitive, crowded field. And so I would say the chances are 50-50 that the phone itself will be a differentiator in terms of people getting on to the Trump mobile bandwagon and taking advantage of what look like at this point in time competitive price points.
Ron, if you look at the number of people who voted for President Trump in the most recent election, and you assume that a significant portion are going to transfer to the T1, for example, I mean, that is a very big number indeed. What do you think we should assume about the customer profile for this type of product? Do you think there'll be any surprises, or will this predominantly be very strong Trump supporters?
Yeah, I think that's important to provide that level set. I would say this is primarily aimed at consumers, and it's again the MVNO model frequently targets a specific audience in order to appeal to their preferences. And so yes, in terms of the U.S. elections, we can look at the number of people who voted for Trump in the tens of millions and say, yes, okay, there's kind of a built-in audience that will be very interested in at least kicking the tires and looking at this offering, as well as independents and others who are non-political and just want to take advantage of a good deal. Now, I would say that in addition to that, there would be small businesses that would also take advantage of this offering. And yes, ultimately, there could be some larger enterprises that would take advantage of it because of what we already touched on, that it's geared toward economic patriots, it's geared toward an America First motif, and there are businesses that do very much like to bundle something like that because they themselves are using the same tactic, knowing that, okay, it will limit their overall market, but it's a very, I would say, a target-rich market, and one that they can definitely ultimately make a profit on, as well as demonstrate that they can deliver good business value.
And that blurring of the lines, that sort of link between politics and profits, do you expect much attention from regulators, compliance challenges that might arise from launching a network with overt political affiliations?
Yeah, I would say that is already there, the conflict of interest concern. However, I think we've already seen that at least, through the remainder of the Trump administration, there won't be any rigorous, I would say, regulatory intervention. There will be the usual checks and balances. However, we've already seen, for example, with this endeavor on the social media side called Truth Social, that there hasn't been any, I would say, direct intervention, and it's pretty much operating along the same lines, that it's the Trump Media and Technology Group headed by Eric Trump and Donald Trump Jr. And as a result, as long as they are the ones who are implementing this, there is enough separation between a direct conflict of interest if theoretically Donald Trump himself were actually heading this endeavor. So it's a very thoughtful question, and my bet is we're going to see the same scenario play out that we already saw with the social media side, that there really won't be any direct intervention. And as long as the other safeguards are respected, I don't think there's going to be much regulatory interference as a result.
And then just going back to what you're saying just then, Ron, about the other brands in that stable, that part of the organization, the technology part. We've got Truth Social, we've now got Trump Mobile. Obviously, Trump Organization is one that does look for aggressive areas of growth. How much investment would be required to move out of this MVNO space into something much larger, much more substantial?
Well, yeah, that is something that will be contextual. I would say at the very least, it would need, I would say, an injection of hundreds of millions of dollars more. And, to be realistic, we can look at Truth Social. It's lost $400 million in, the fiscal year 2024. And it's only generating, approximately $3 million in annual revenues. So that's something that can actually ended up getting shut down just because of the sheer finances, regardless of the Trump brand. Now, in terms of Trump Mobile, we're looking at a new level set. And so it could actually maybe benefit from other parts of the Trump Media and Technology Group, such as the cryptocurrency side, that might be able to generate, I would say, positive revenues that could then be distributed to help invest in Trump Mobile. But the bottom line is going to be how much can Trump Mobile actually succeed on its own, and that is something that we're just going to have to wait and see, because it doesn't even become commercially available until August, and then we have to see how things play out, because while there's certainly, I would say, enough of a critical mass to support it, there could be other factors that crop up that could compromise the brand name because of political considerations in themselves, let alone independent of financial factors, as there's volatility related to cryptocurrency, but also to the MVNO market itself. So that's a very, important question, but one that's ultimately going to be decided.
And finally, Ron, what lessons can be drawn from previous launches, previous attempts to build lifestyle branded telecoms in the very competitive US market?
Yeah, it's mixed. I mean, it can actually be very successful. We've seen the Mint model, or Mint mobile model, be very successful, as well as Cricket, another MVNO. And so there is, I would say, a blueprint for being successful. But we've also seen other MVNOs that are geared toward very specific audiences, for example, based on language, based on geography and so forth, not be successful. And so I would say that this MVNO has the ability to avoid limitations of MVNOs that were just too narrow in terms of their target audience. And as such, it can probably be more, I would say, competitive, certainly in the near to midterm as a result. But it's going to come down to, hey, further out, say after 2028, what will be, the status of the Trump brand name in terms of being able to propel something like a Trump mobile offering. That is something that I think would be very interesting. But at this point, it's very speculative. And so I would say it's kind of in that 50-50 range, whether or not this Trump mobile MVNO can be successful based on the history of previous attempts of MVNO models here in the U.S.
Well, time will tell, and Ron, I'm sure you'll be back to update us on the progress. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Ron Westfall, there for us. Well,
I appreciate it.
It is the biggest stage for aviation. Deals where billion-dollar orders are signed in front of cameras and rival manufacturers jostle for global attention. But at this year's Paris Air Show, the spotlight has shifted decisively to just one side of the runway. Let's take a look at this report.
The Paris Air Show is usually a battle between Boeing and Airbus to see who can announce the most big deals. But this year the contest appears to be a bit one-sided. By Wednesday, Airbus had trumpeted a string of deals totaling $21 billion in all. Notable orders included one for up to 150 planes for Vietnamese budget airline VietJet, and there could be more to come. AirAsia boss Tony Fernandez says he's in talks with Airbus over an order for up to 170 new jets, though he's also talking to Brazilian rival Embraer and cautioned an agreement probably wouldn't be ready to sign during the show. Meanwhile, it was a very different story over at the Boeing chalet. The US giant has opted to keep a low profile following last week's deadly crash involving one of its 787s operated by Air India. Chief Executive Kelly Ortberg subsequently cancelled plans to go to Paris, saying he wanted to focus on the crash investigation. The firm has also decided not to announce any orders during the show. Boeing had anyway sealed a string of huge deals during Donald Trump's recent tour of the Middle East, leaving it with less to reveal in Paris. Meanwhile, this week saw some hopeful signs for the industry as a whole, which has been plagued by shortages of parts and resulting delays in the delivery of new aircraft. Airbus said Wednesday it was now experiencing 40% fewer disruptions caused by delayed parts. That will raise hopes for airlines desperate to get their hands on new jets.
As Trump Mobile then dials into a high-stakes market, questions remain over whether bold branding can truly disrupt entrenched networks or simply echo in a niche. From infrastructure limits to regulatory noise, this is one launch that's generating plenty of static. Well, from all of us here at World Business, thanks for watching.